agriculture is important. Equity in agriculture is important. And that just happens to include cannabis, which is important because we have to repair from the harm done by the war on drugs. But that it includes so many other things and so many other wonderful opportunities to increase revenue in this state, and in our local communities, which need it so much.
I'm Penelope Hamilton, and this is the Cannabis Community Insider. You've just heard from Illinois State Representative Sonya Harper. Representative Harper is chairperson of the House Agriculture and Conservation Committee and a staunch leader and advocate for smart cannabis policy, equity, and diversity. Now let's join Mark Peysakhovich and Representative Sonya Harper as they take a look inside the 2022 legislative session.
Representative, thank you very much for being with us. How have you been? How's your COVID world going?
You know what? I won't complain. I'm blessed. My family's healthy. Everyone's healthy. We're getting back into the swing and groove of things, even though everyone has had setbacks, from this past year or so going on too. But yeah, everything's good. I can't complain.
Good. So we have a short session coming up, right? We usually in session January through end of May. This year we're in January through end of March. And that's gonna, there's gonna be a lot of traffic pileup, I'm thinking, perhaps. In addition to that, we've got this, new COVID variant, and God knows what that will do. How do you envision do you envision that, anything big, cannabis or otherwise, is going to be done this session, or is it sort of just going to be like, let's tread water and try to get out unscathed?
I think it's maybe more of the latter. I've never seen a session schedule like this before. I'm not sure if any others have, and since I've been in here. I know that it is an election year, and that has to probably do with the session schedule. But I'm trying to be optimistic in that, people are able to, especially I'm able to get our legislative priorities, over the gate, over the finish line. I don't see people maybe taking on very contentious issues, perhaps, this year, especially considering it's a shortened session. But I do know, the folks have a lot of stuff that was lined up from the last session that they want to get passed, as well as previous years. So I know that folks are going to be trying to get as much through as they possibly can. I'll be right along in that number.
Yeah, I guess we all, well, you will be, and people like me will be cheering from the gallery. So in terms of cannabis policy, there's a lot going on, and we're certainly not going to get into everything, but you've sort of staked out an interesting spot in terms of cannabis, because you've focused a lot on sort of what I would call hospitality, travel, delivery, tourism, as far as cannabis goes. And I got to say, that's brilliant, because if you go to Colorado, it seems like a third of their tourism is cannabis-based. And having previously been a cannabis tourist in Colorado, I can tell you it draws tourists, right? So in the past, if I recall correctly, you had really big proposals, one dealing with home delivery of cannabis. You also have dealt with consumption spaces, public consumption spaces. And, I just want to pause here and get on my soapbox for a minute, because everybody looks at consumption sort of as a luxury, as people going out to get messed up. But it's not a luxury if you can't consume in your government subsidized housing. Or it's not a luxury if you live in a group home environment, and this is medicine for you, but not allowed in the building, or whatever it is. And so in terms of the kinds of priorities that you've generally taken on, do you have anything teed up? What do you see coming up, and how can the thousands of active cannabis advocates, consumers, and patients who are going to be exposed to this interview help with anything that you got going on?
Sure. So you named several measures that I currently have in the hopper that I am hoping to get some action on this session. I want to back up a bit and just say, the Black Caucus, we were very instrumental in coming up with the original social equity components of the legislation. There were a lot of things that we recommended be in the bill that didn't make it into there. And so some of what you see proposed in some of these bills, such as the social equity delivery, such as the social consumption, as well as the events and tours, were part of our long list of just opening up the number of opportunities for the everyday person to enter this large cannabis industry. And so following up on that, we just want to make sure, again, that we're providing as many opportunities for folks. And so we see that not everyone is going to be able to afford a large scale cultivation center, or maybe not everybody wants one. But what are some other points of entry into this business, into this industry that could be sustainable for both businesses and both for communities that so much need that revenue? And so that's why I'm really hoping that we can get some action on these bills this session.
Do you, in terms of your own priorities, do you have, if somebody tells you you have one or two bills to pass, what are you going to try to move first? Or, you may not even be there in terms of strategy yet. So I'll let you off on that one. But I'm wondering if in terms of your own thinking, there's something that's really should happen sooner rather than later.
You know what? I really hate to rank them, but I get a
love all my kids, right? I love all my kids.
All my bills are important. All of my ideas need to go right now. But I've been getting a lot of feedback about the social equity delivery. Lots of folks interested in that market and really wanting to know, when are we going to open that up? And so that's a really good one that I'm hoping to move. Another thing that we've also looked at is ancillary businesses, and trying to figure out a way that we can make sure, even if you're not touching cannabis, if you are a lawyer, if you have janitorial services, or if you do marketing, or if you provide some other service, in what way can we mesh these businesses into the current cannabis industry? And so we're talking about actually putting together some type of similar to the current business enterprise program that we have with the state, where we have to contract a certain percentage of business with women and minority vendors. We're looking at the same thing as it relates to the Illinois cannabis market too. Again, looking at ways in which we can open this thing wide up and cast the net far for as many businesses as possible to join in on this billion-dollar industry.
Do you see, so one of the things that you mentioned that really is interesting to me in terms of the state thing, you sort of make it like a state thing, because right now we're looking at equity is within the context of beginning to heal the wounds caused by the war on drugs. State diversity program is much more broad than that. Women, people with disabilities. Do you see that fitting in? Are we going to be able to shoehorn this in, or are we just going to have different kinds of white people trying to get into the industry because of that? I'm just so, like, this whole thing is blowing my mind. I was on a call yesterday and we were talking about equity, and I reminded people that my biggest client when I was helping consult on applications was a Black man who came from very humble beginnings, became very, very successful, had to deal with and avoid all the pitfalls that everyone in his inner city neighborhood did, but now he's wealthy and didn't qualify for social equity. And so as we think about who, and then we complain about the fact that people who get these licenses, people of color who get these licenses, don't have the capital to operate, right? So it's like, but we're keeping some of them out. So what are ways we're going to sort of further calibrate and target social equity in terms of getting the right people the opportunities?
I got you. Well, first, I think we made some changes thus far, right, to our statute, right, as we try to drill down more on those social equity applicants. And I think that what we do right now is we wait and we see how the market goes. And our process has been designed that if we need to narrow the scope even more further to catch certain applicants or broaden it more to catch certain applicants, then we should make those adjustments as necessary as we go. I think that right now it's important that we see how things go as they are, and then we study the market, right? This big disparity study that we're waiting on so that we can maybe make some more permanent changes down the road to ensure equity forever. I never thought that we were gonna just nail equity 100% on the head the first time, the first gate in a brand new industry that we've never seen before, that folks all over the country are still learning how to do, right? We are, I don't want to say we're not experimenting, but we are doing something new. We are implementing something new. And so in everything, you kind of want to give it a chance before you start trying to mess with it and make even more changes. But I am always keeping my eye and making sure that we are defining social equity applicants correctly so that we make sure those people who are harmed, who are still suffering harms from the war on drugs, are given their fair due. I don't think, yeah.
So one of the things that I neglected to bring up is that you have a high position, maybe pun intended, I don't know, within the Legislative Black Caucus, right? You're the House Caucus chair, is that correct?
I am the Joint Caucus chair.
You're the joint. Oh, I'm sorry, I demoted you. You're actually you're actually even more important than I said. So you had mentioned the caucus previously in terms of the significant contribution. I mean, everybody's so cynical and impatient with everything. And to your point, we're still working on Social Security and Medicaid, and it's been 60 years. I mean, we're still working on voter rights, and how long has that been? And there are steps forward and backward. And my own favorite is when we passed, when adult use was enacted in Illinois, I had somebody say to me, well, are you bummed now? Like, as a lobbyist, your work's going to be gone, right? Because you did this thing. And I said, well, beer's been legal for 100 years, but the Illinois beer distributors are still one of the most powerful organizations in Springfield, so I'm not so afraid for my own livelihood. And it really does seem like, whatever the issue, whether it's, electric vehicles or cannabis, talk a little bit about sort of, I don't think people should stop having high expectations of government, and I don't think people should be non-cynical, because I think systems of complexity themselves have been used to discriminate for centuries. Is it possible in government to do things a lot quicker and always get it right? I just don't think so, right? It's trial and error.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I'm not so sure, especially depending on how many agencies or people or different entities have to have their hand in the pot in order to make something happen, right? Yeah.
And there's a huge sort of cross-section of agencies. I'm sure you've heard a little bit about ideas to sort of consolidate into one sort of authority or board or something. Is that something you would, and sort of give it administrative power, more leeway rather than having to take legislative action all the time? What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts is that there definitely should be some streamlining of the what is it, about 13 agencies that have to touch the adult use market. I think propose a piece of legislation that was kind of related to it, and I have been having some conversations with our cannabis czar about it. But yes, I definitely think that we need to work on streamlining to make sure that equity, right, really happens the way that we want it to happen, to make sure that the market in Illinois goes the way that we want it to happen. The way that this conversation kind of came about is that I realized that in legislation, when we were thinking of who the cannabis czar was, we envision that person having a little bit more power and authority, and their recommendations, actually having some weight. And so what we've come to know is that that actually is not the case in the state of Illinois. And so that all goes, with that overall idea of having one central agency or office that is actually in charge of implementation, most importantly, in charge of ensuring equity, right? Which was the big sounding alarm for even bringing this market about. And so, yeah, those are my thoughts about that. We have to ensure equity. As part of our pillars, and as part of legislation I even carried all last year, because we were worried about this, because we were worried about ensuring equity from here on out, right? We could do it perfectly under this administration, right? We could line it up perfectly to legislators in 2021. But what happens 20 years down the line when all different, people are in seats, right?
When Bruce Rauner Jr. takes office.
I hate to say it, right? How do we know that the rules are still going to be followed, that whatever set-asides are going to be safe? How do we ensure that right now? And I'm not certain that we're set up like that so that we can ensure equity from here on out. And so one of the things that I proposed last session was a Cannabis Equity Commission, to kind of be the oversight of everything, even sometimes down to approving those licenses. And I think that's kind of the direction that we're going in as we have conversations about what that could look like, about what one agency could look like, or just several agencies regulating the market here in Illinois.
One of the things that you talked about, obviously a key point in terms of equity is representation. And so far we have focused on representation in terms of ownership. And we tried to do something to expand jobs also as part of social equity, but that has had mixed reviews, and I think we can all understand why. But are there ways to tackle equity from other directions? For example, has the Black Caucus talked about sort of expanding, sort of ways, the tools that you can use for equity to begin to move towards equity?
Again, we have a very long list of ideas, right, of ways that we can expand. And when you said something earlier, you said, are there other ways, to get equity here, that we need equity other than in ownership? And I was like, heck yeah. Especially not just as it relates to the tax revenue, right? The tax revenue cut and making sure that those funds are going where they are supposed to go. There's been lots of complaints about the R3 program, which is how the funneling of those monies are going, and just making sure that organizations and businesses who are in those communities are actually getting a fair chance and a fair shot at those funds, in whatever way that means, whether they need assistance, whether they need the outreach to do so, whether they need somebody saying, hey, apply for this grant right now, so forth and so on. I think that when you think about another thing that you said is it's becoming harder, for poor people to be able to access cannabis, even if it's for medicine. And when I think about the community that I live in, whether it's for medicine, employment opportunities, or whatever, there's not a dispensary for 10 miles. There's not one. And one of the biggest things that we had hoped for and that we prayed for on the onset of adult use was that we wanted to see some of these businesses in our communities. I haven't seen one yet. And the business in the industry is continuing to grow. I know it all comes down to, your personal perception, right? Everybody wants to put their business, right, in a very good location, probably where other businesses are already located. But that is a key area on which I see that we need some more equity in the geographical locations of where some of these dispensaries are being placed. I don't know how much control that we really have over that, again, because it's such a personal preference with business owners, but that's what I see. And then when you bring up the issue about criminal records, you know, there are people still here across the state who still haven't had their cannabis records expunged, right? For whatever reasons, their local authorities say that they don't have the capacity to do it or the right equipment to do it. And think about how much of a hindrance and a holdup that is on people's lives. And so again, we have some things right there I think that we can work on correcting again in our current situation, as well as looking for how do we open up even more opportunities for people with records to enter the industry, right? Especially those people who have cannabis records, and really making it plain and accessible to them in a way that I don't think that we have made it yet.
Yeah, you know, and again, to me, it seems like, you know, Black folks with money and Black folks with legacy cannabis experience should be some of the first ones to get in. In terms of just to get, because you are the leader of the Black Caucus, has there been a deeper dive on cannabis recently? Do you guys sort of as a caucus have a game plan, or is that something you'll be working on here in the next, you know?
That's something we're actually working on right now as we speak. Yep.
Okay.
We have a small work group going. Again, you know, we've already had legislation proposed. Right. And so we're just trying to figure out what the right strategy is to move forward. Also, as we consult with different advocates, community organizations, and people on the ground, as well as folks in the industry and in the agencies, just making sure that we hit all of our bases on the proposals that we're choosing to move forward on.
Is there any particular, are there folks in your caucus who are sort of the go-to people on cannabis, or is it just sort of are folks doing whatever they feel is right in terms of introducing stuff? The experts. I
got you. So I think so. Right now, I think I'm carrying the most of the legislation related to cannabis.
And I should have said experts other than you. I'm sorry.
You know, LaShawn came in real good last session with the cleanup. We're probably going to be leaning towards him for some stuff as well. Yeah, that's all I can say for right now. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is really wonderful. Anything else on your mind, cannabis related? Anything you want to let folks know? I mean, I guess, like, to me, I just keep coming down to the fact that, you know, the legislature did pretty well with this bill. Y'all didn't always get it implemented right, but, you know, people in the legislature can't, you know, do the math that we're, you know, I'm not the one sitting with the calculators adding up the points from these licenses. I'll just leave it at that. But anything else on your mind as we move forward that sort of people should be thinking about, or the ways people can help? You know, the cannabis community has got, I don't know, 30, 40,000 really active members who are constantly online and churning. And I think they're always wanting to get behind folks like you, who they see as leaders and champions. And, you know, as we wrap this up, any asks of them or any words of encouragement or anything?
Yes, we always welcome help with advocating, you know, for our bills. Getting bills passed in Springfield is not an easy feat. And so if anyone sees anything out there that we've already introduced, or you have ideas that can make our bills better, please bring them forward. You see something you like, come and help us get it passed in Springfield. The other thing I always like to bring up is when we talk about cannabis, we always concentrate on medical and adult use. And, you know, as the ag chair, as an ag lover, that also includes hemp. So don't forget about hemp. I'm also interested in ways that we can ensure equity in our Illinois hemp market as well, and educate more people about that as well. And equity in agriculture, period. Especially as it relates to food access. Food is what brought me to the agriculture industry, to the business here in Chicago, living in a food desert, taking our food access into our own hands, knowing that legalization was coming and trying to provide the base skills for that. And so really just promoting to folks that agriculture is important. Equity in agriculture is important. And that just happens to include cannabis, which is important because we have to repair from the harm done by the war on drugs. But that it includes so many other things and so many other wonderful opportunities to increase revenue in this state and in our local communities, which need it so much. So those are my final.
Amen. Amen, Madam Chairwoman of Agriculture. If we can ever provide that platform, especially as you're going forward, especially if you want the message to get out to the really hardcore enthusiasts in Illinois, we're here for you.
Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you for being a champion.
It's my pleasure. It's my job.
All right. Well, we'll see you in January, if not before. Thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All
Happy
right. Bye-bye.
holiday.
You too.